Join yourtherapysource.com and listen about how you can teach sensory modulation in kids. Perhaps you are reading an occupational therapy evaluation or maybe an article on the internet, and you are wondering what is sensory modulation. Sensory modulation is the ability of the brain to interpret sensory input and form an appropriate behavioral and motor response. The definition of sensory modulation has been described by researchers Brown and Fortune as the following. Sensory modulation is considered a twofold process. It originates in the central nervous system as the neurological ability to regulate and process sensory stimuli. This subsequently offers the individual an opportunity to respond behaviorally to the stimulus. In simpler terms, sensory modulation is the ability of the brain to interpret sensory input and form a response that results in maintaining the body at an appropriate level of alertness. Why is sensory modulation important? Our bodies and brains need to be able to filter out important sensory information and ignore irrelevant sensory information in order to formulate an adaptive response. By interpreting sensory information properly, we are able to keep the body in a ready state. When sensory information is not organized correctly by the brain and body, individuals may overreact to sensory stimulation, i.e. motion sickness, underreact to sensations, i.e. always moving, or fluctuate between the two, sluggy or moving non-stop. Let's explore sensory modulation within a social-emotional learning (SEL) framework and tiers of intervention. Social-emotional learning (SEL) is a framework for teaching skills necessary for emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Sensory modulation, while not explicitly named in the core SEL competencies, plays a crucial role in supporting these competencies, especially in self-awareness and self-management. Understanding and managing one's sensory needs directly contributes to emotional regulation and social interaction, which are key components of SEL. Here is more information on sensory modulation and SEL competencies. Sensory modulation helps individuals recognize their own sensory preferences and discomforts, which is a vital aspect of self-awareness. Being aware of one's sensory needs allows for better understanding of one's emotions and behaviors in different sensory environments. Managing one's sensory needs is essential for self-regulation, a core aspect of self-management. Effective sensory modulation strategies help individuals maintain focus, reduce anxiety, and handle stress, contributing to better impulse control and self-discipline. Understanding and respecting others' sensory needs can foster empathy and improve social interactions, aiding in the development of relationship skills. This understanding can lead to more inclusive and supportive social and learning environments. Sensory modulation strategies can be implemented within tiers of intervention. The tiers of intervention in education typically refer to a three-tiered model of support. Tier 1: Universal interventions. At this level, sensory-friendly environments and routines are integrated into the general classroom setting to benefit all students. Activities like sensory breaks or the use of sensory tools, like fidgets, can be part of the universal design for learning, promoting a conducive learning environment for all. Tier 2: Targeted interventions. For students showing signs of sensory modulation challenges or those identified through screening, targeted group or individual interventions are introduced. This may include more structured sensory activities, guided sensory exploration, or specific routines to support sensory needs. Tier 3: Intensive, individualized interventions. Students with significant sensory modulation difficulties or diagnosed sensory modulation disorders might receive more intensive, Individualized support. This could involve one-on-one sessions with an occupational therapist, personalized sensory diets, and close collaboration with parents and educators to ensure consistency across all environments. Incorporating sensory modulation into the SEL framework and tiers of intervention can provide a holistic approach to supporting children's social, emotional, and sensory development. It emphasizes the importance of creating inclusive environments that recognize and accommodate the diverse sensory and emotional needs of all students. What is sensory modulation disorder? Sensory modulation disorder can be present when individuals frequently demonstrate exaggerated behaviors or inappropriate responses to basic sensory input. These responses do not match what you would typically see based on the environmental demands or expectations. There can be many different responses and unusual behaviors in individuals with sensory modulation disorder. For example, one person may be over-responsive to sensory stimuli, and bright lights may be extremely unpleasant, causing an extreme avoidance reaction when they walk into a room. Someone else may be under-responsive to vestibular stimulation and will seek out an increased intensity of that type of movement, wanting to spin and spin on a swing for hours. Another example might be over-responsiveness, low threshold, to tactile stimulation, and a child finds wearing socks to be painful. This can result in increased stress levels, making it hard to focus on learning if they cannot stop thinking about their socks. Sometimes sensory defensiveness can be so extreme that it can cause a flight or fight response by the autonomic nervous system. Research has indicated that sensory modulation disorder symptoms can negatively affect developmental and functional abilities, limiting a child's participation in school, leisure activities, socializing, and more. What interventions are helpful? Occupational therapists can provide insight regarding sensory integration to help your student or child. It is important to ask an occupational or physical therapist if you have questions about the most appropriate activities for a specific child. During therapy sensory integration sessions, children with sensory processing disorder will practice being exposed to different environmental stimuli in a safe environment. They will work with the OT or PT to form an appropriate behavioral and motor skill response. Basic suggestions to help with sensory modulation. Here are a few basic suggestions to help children respond to incoming sensory stimuli throughout their school day. It can be helpful for children to follow a consistent routine at first so they know what to expect. This makes it easier to formulate a response to sensory input. Provide children with verbal and visual reminders that a transition will soon occur so they are prepared to get their body ready to work. If possible, provide choices of activities. Most children know if they feel like they need to move to be alert or if they need to sit and be focused. Reduce excessive odors in the classroom, like perfumes or scented oils, that may make it difficult for a student to modulate their sensory reactivity. Proprioceptive input, heavy work activities, can help all students to process sensory input. Try including motor skills such as jumping, wall push-ups, crawling, etc. into the day to provide this type of input for your sensory-seeking students. Reduce distractibility from auditory input by providing a quiet environment at times throughout the day to reduce sensory processing difficulties. Use self-regulation strategies such as checklists to help children get their bodies ready to learn. Teach children about emotional regulation to help deepen their understanding of behavioral responses. Provide opportunities for children to register and process meaningful sensory input to that child. For example, try to offer activities that challenge the child but not overwhelm him, her. Each time that the child is successful in forming appropriate responses to sensory input, they can build upon that for future or more challenging experiences. Advanced strategies for teaching sensory modulation to children. Building upon the foundational understanding of sensory modulation and its importance in children's development, let's explore some advanced strategies. These strategies can further assist educators, therapists, and parents in supporting children, especially those with sensory modulation disorders. The goal is to create environments and routines that not only accommodate sensory needs, but also promote sensory growth and self-regulation. Try structured sensory exploration. Regularly incorporate sensory exploration into the child's routine. This could involve sensory bins filled with materials like rice, beans, or water beads, offering a variety of textures, temperatures, and weights. The goal is to allow the child to explore these in a controlled setting to become more accustomed to different sensory inputs. Organize sensory walks, where children are encouraged to notice and discuss the sensory input they receive from their environment, such as the feeling of the wind, the texture of the grass, or the sounds of birds. Adapt the environment to be more sensory-friendly. Modify the environment to better control sensory inputs. This can involve using dimmer switches for lighting, sound-absorbing materials to reduce noise levels, or providing areas with less visual clutter. By tailoring the sensory characteristics of the environment, you can create spaces that accommodate various sensory preferences and needs. Designate specific areas where movement is encouraged and safe, like a corner with soft mats for tumbling or a space with therapy balls. These areas allow children, especially those who seek proprioceptive input, to engage in movement-based activities without disrupting others. Be proactive and provide sensory prevention techniques. Implement scheduled sensory breaks throughout the day, allowing children to engage in preferred sensory activities that help them regulate. These breaks can prevent sensory overload and help maintain a state of optimal arousal for learning and interaction. Teach children to recognize the early signs of sensory overwhelm and equip them with strategies to cope before it escalates. This might involve using a simple checklist of bodily sensations or a chart of emotions to help them articulate their state and seek support or a sensory break. Infuse the day with interactive sensory activities. Use stories or books that incorporate sensory elements, such as textured pages, scented stickers, or sound buttons. This not only makes reading a multisensory experience but also helps in contextualizing sensory experiences within narratives. Engage children in art projects that involve multiple sensory experiences, like finger painting, clay modeling, or crafting with various materials. The tactile, visual, and potentially olfactory stimuli can help in sensory modulation and creative expression. Encourage sensory feedback and communication. Encourage older children to keep a sensory journal where they can express how different sensory experiences make them feel. This practice can foster self-awareness and communication skills. For children who have difficulties with verbal communication, incorporating sign language, visual supports, or picture exchange systems can provide them with alternative means to express their sensory needs and discomforts. Collaborate for different sensory solutions. Regularly hold meetings with children, parents, and educators to discuss and plan sensory-friendly strategies. This collaborative approach ensures that everyone is aware of the child's needs and can work together to create a supportive environment. Pair children with sensory modulation difficulties with a peer advocate who can assist them during overwhelming sensory situations. This not only provides immediate support but also promotes empathy and understanding among peers. Stay informed and share resources. Encourage educators and parents to participate in workshops or webinars offered by platforms like your therapy source. Staying informed about the latest research and strategies in sensory modulation can greatly enhance the support provided to children. Create a resource library of books, articles, and toolkits on sensory modulation. Having easy access to information can empower parents and educators to implement effective strategies at home and in the classroom. By integrating these advanced strategies with the basic suggestions, caregivers and educators can provide a comprehensive approach to supporting children with sensory modulation needs. The aim is to not only accommodate their sensory differences but also to empower them to understand, communicate, and manage their sensory experiences effectively. Visit yourtherapysource.com for more information on sensory processing disorder and how you can help students succeed. References for this article are available on the blog. The link is in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated. See you next time.